In this video lecture, we're going to be talking about strings for Python. Strings are a data type in Python, but unlike integers, floats, and booleans, they give you a lot more functionality. That's why the others are basically called a primitive data type, the primitives here. So I'm going to first start by listing the 5 features or properties that I want you to know for strings, and then we're going to go discuss them one by one. First thing first, strings are a data type. Strings are also a collection. They're in fact a sequence of characters. Strings are iterable, so I can iterate over a string in a for loop. Strings are also immutable. What that means is that I am unable to mutate a string once I have defined it. And finally, we're going to talk about methods of strings and functions that can be applied on strings. So let's start our discussion by first talking about strings as a data type. Now, this you've done before. This is fairly simple. A way to define a variable with a string value is I'll say hello world, and there's a space in the middle. And a way to distinguish between any other type or a string is you see your text or your characters or numbers or symbols enclosed by double quotations or a single quotation. So now I can say that var here is a string variable, and it contains the value hello world. I can also define a empty string. So I'll do this thing. So there's nothing in here, there's no space, and this is an empty string. It's good if you want to construct a string, you can definitely do this case. And finally, as a data type, we know that typecasting is a thing. So to convert a variable of a different data type into string, we'll use the str function. So I could do str of 5, and that would return to me the string version of the number 5. So fairly simple here. Next, we will talk about string as a collection. And I'm going to write down the variable again. So var is currently, let me space them out a little. Hello, space, world. And this is what we'll see when we write the code. But for Python, it will in fact see strings as a collection of characters. So for a string, Python will see them something like this. So it will, every element or character in this case will be a unique value, and it will be in a unique placement or order for that string. And a way to remember where things are, Python employs a numbering system which starts with 0. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there's also a numbering system going backwards, starting with -1. So -1, -2, -3, and so on and so forth. Now, these things, these numbering system, they are called indexes or indices, and what they do is allow you to extract a single element from a string when you need to. So given a string variable var, I am able to use box brackets here and pass in an index value. So it's going to be an integer, a number. And what Python will do is it will say, okay, this line of the code is saying give me the element at this index in var. So if you look at an example, we'll say, okay, var of 0. So to Python, you're saying, give me the 0th index of my string var, and you say, okay, at 0th index, you have the letter H. So this thing will give you letter H. And we can try different examples. I can do a var of 3, and you'll basically start counting. You'll say, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay, whatever's at index 3 will be returned, and you get the letter L. I can also use the negative ones, so I can do give me the index of give me the element at index -4, let's say, a var, and what you'll do is you'll say, okay, -1, -2, -3, -4. That's going to give you the letter O. Now, be careful that if you were to type in or give it a index value that is beyond this range from 0 to 10, or these -1 to -11, I'm sure this is going to be. If I give me the var of 50, well, it doesn't exist. And so this is going to throw you in error. So you have to be careful about the index you're giving in those box brackets, that it is a viable or legal index. So it is within the range between 0 and 10 over here. Now, this method of doing or accessing a single element of a string is called indexing. And similar to that, we now have another method, and that's called slicing. So you might have thought that it's not enough that you are only able to extract a single character every single time from a string. What slicing allows you to do is be able to extract more than that. So if indexing gives you returns one element or character, slicing will give you a substring from a string. And what a substring basically means is it's just a bunch of characters. So hello inside var is a substring, world is a substring, hell is a substring, so on and so forth. So the way to do that is, you'll say var, and in box brackets again. So the box brackets are going to stick around for when you're using collections like indexing, basically, for all these collection types we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. And you say a colon in the middle, and now you give it the starting index and the ending index. And just like the range function, whatever is at the starting index is included, and the ending index, whatever is at the ending index, it's going to be excluded, so it's not going to be included in your substring. By that I mean, if I were to do var of 0 through 5, let's say, well, what Python is going to say is, okay, you're looking for a substring, you're slicing your string between these two starting and ending index values, so you're going to include H, E, L, L, O, but you're not going to include the space, because it is at the ending index. So this results in hello. Now, you're definitely able to do more with this. Let's look at another example. So if I were to do var of -2 to -1, well, you're saying start here, -2, and then go all the way until -1. So this guy is not going to be included again because that's the ending index. So this should result in just the letter L. A couple more examples. Let's see, the var index, we can do 6 to 11. Now you'll notice that 11 isn't here, right? It doesn't exist, the index value. Well, that's fine because we're not looking for the 11th index, we're looking for the indexes starting 6 to 10, and this should result 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That will give you the word world. One way you could make life easy for you is if you know you want to slice a string and you want to start from the very beginning, you could leave it blank and just do something like this. Let's say go to 5. And what that means is, by default, that there was a 0 over here. So you don't really need it. It just means that start at the beginning. And just like that, you can also do, let's say 6 to nothing, and this just means go until the very end. So I'm just going to put end over there. Very much similar to strings, range functions, you're also able to apply a skip value. So we know that I am able to do starting index, the ending index. Well, now I can have another set of colons and then just say this is going to be the skip parameter. And so I am very much able to do var of, let's do 0 up to 5, and then skip by 2. Now, an easy way to remember how this would work is you just go one by one. You say, okay, I'm going to evaluate this first, which will become hello that we know of, right? 0 to 5, and then skip every second letter. So you're going to remove this, you're going to remove that L, and so you should be left with H, L, O. Let's look at some code in Atom and see how this all works out. Okay, so let's continue with our example. I'm going to define a variable var with the value hello world, and just to show you what the data type is for var, I'm going to run this, the type function, and it gives you str, so it's a string. And we'll do a couple of examples for indexing with a string and slicing. So for indexing, let's say I want to know which is the last character in a string, and the way I'll do it is I'll say, okay, I can print out var -1 because the last index is also -1, and so -2, -3, -4, and so on. So if I run this code, we'll get the letter D. And now say I ask you to write a program where you need to get a string and then print the first and the last letters. So we could do something along the lines of first is going to be var 0, and last is going to be var -1. And I'm going to print first and last here, and you're going to notice that H and D are printed. Now we could again change this, so instead of just having a hard-coded variable, I could do var is input from the user, and I could say give me a string. And if I were to run this, let's give it an example, elephant, and you see that the first element, the first character, E, is the first value, and then T is the last. Okay. When it comes to slicing, I'm going to keep this as is. With slicing, again, the idea is the same. You're still using indexes, but now you're adding a colon between to sort of say what these a substring from a string, basically. So I'm able to do something along the lines of print vars, let's say 0 to 3. And let's ask the user for an input, and I'm going to give them elephant again. And you'll notice that the first 3 elements or characters here are printed because that's index 0, that's index 1, and index 2, but P, which is technically index 3, is not going to be included because that's the ending position in my slicing. I'm also able to, let's say, do something like this. Now this should not phase you. What it basically means is start at the very beginning, go until the very end. and so just give me the entire string. So let me put a space in here, and let's give it a string elephant again, and you'll see that it gives you the entire string. Now we can always play around with the skip here. So again, start from the very beginning, go into the very end, but skip every second character. And if I were to run this code, and let's say give it A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, you'll notice that the B, D, F, H, and J were skipped because they were every second letters in that string. Now, here's a very cool one in terms of slicing. So start from the very beginning, go to the very end, but do a skip of -1. Now, this is very peculiar because what it does is it will reverse your entire string. It's a very nifty little piece of code to remember. Very useful to have at times. Okay, so let's move to the third property that we talked about for strings, and that is string as an iterable. And here the idea again is that because a string is a collection and it's made of tiny little components, you're able to go over all those components. And it works because, again, string is a collection. So let's define a variable and give it the value hello. And I'm going to write two different for loops here for you. So I'm going to say for I in var print I, and that's loop number 1. And here's loop number 2, where I'm saying for I in range of 0 to 5, print var of I. Now, you might think that these two for loops are doing things a little bit different, but it's not quite the case here. So let's look at the first one. We know for a fact that the I inside a for loop, this is the iterating variable, and so it's dynamically created, and what happens is that a cursor will go down on our collection here. So if you remember, this is going to be a collection. And what you're seeing is assign that cursor's value to I every time you iterate over this piece of code. So what's going to happen is I, for the very first time, will become the letter H, and that's going to get printed. Then the cursor will move on in that direction, and you'll get an E, L, L, O. And that's the result from the first loop. Pretty simple. For the second one, what you'll need to do first is evaluate what this range turns out to be, and it should be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, 5 is not going to be included here. And now what I'm saying is I will take on each of these values, and it's going to keep going in that direction. So I will become 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. And so instead of printing the value of I, print the element at the ith index of variable. So I'm going to write that down. This print means print the element at the ith index of var. So if I is 0, at the 0th index of var, you have the letter H. And when I becomes 1, at the first index, you have the letter E. So I'm going to write 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 here. And you're going to continue, and you're going to see that code 2 does the exact same job here too. So there are now two different ways of extracting information or the characters from a string. You can either just use your string as the collection that you want to iterate over, or you could use a range that goes over how big your string is. And when we go over the length function, it's going to get really, really easy to just be able to use the range in there. Okay, so let's look at some code related to iterating over strings. So I'm going to define string1 as hello, and I'm going to define string2 as world. And here's what I can do. I'll run a for loop for I in range, and I know for a fact that these two are the same size, so I can go from 0 to 5, just for the sake of it. And let's print out the ith index of string1, as well as the ith index of string2. So string1 I, comma, string2 I. And just to show you that what's happening here, I will do the index is, and I'm going to put a comma again, and the letters are, and I'm going to put a comma here. So what I'm saying is the index is, let's say 0, and the letters are going to be, in that case, H and W, and so on and so forth. And if I run that, you'll notice that the index is 0, and at index 0, we know that's for certain, string 1 has an H in there, string 2 has a W. And for index 1, you have E and O. For index 2, you have L and R. For index 2, you have L and L, so the matching happens over here. And then at index 4, you have the letters O and D. So it gives you a really good idea of how you're able to use indexes here. And let's also look at the other way around, where I'm just using my entire collection, my string, as the iterating collection here. So I can do for I in string 1, print I. Now in this case, I'm saying I is going to take up the value of every single element that is currently inside string 1, and I'm going to print that. Now please remember that the I in this case, in the upper commented out for loop, is not going to give you every character. It is currently going over the index value. So in this case, I will have become 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in this case, I will become H, E, L, L, O. A clear distinction to make. We can use this to solve a cool problem. Let's say the user gives you 2 words, and you have to figure out at what index do both words have the same letter. So let's try that. So I'm going to ask the user for 2 inputs, so I'm going to actually replace this here. I'm going to say input. I'm going to say enter word 1 and input enter word 2. And we can do something along the lines of for I in range, we'll need to know the length. So let's say we have a limitation that they're both going to be the size 5 because we haven't gone over the length function yet. So this thing, if string 1's ith index value is equals to string 2 ith index value, and I'll explain the code a little bit. Print there is a match. Print I. So what I'm hoping to do here is ask the user for 2 different inputs, and for now I'm forcing them to be only 5 characters long. And if at any point one of the characters, just like this example here, so hello and world here, if at any point there are 2 letters in the same index that are matching, so L and L here, I'm going to print out this piece of code. So to try it out, I'm going to run this code, and I'm going to give it A, B, C, DE, and then I'm going to give it XYZ DF, let's say. So it says there is a match and the number 3 because you have index 0, 1, 2, 3. So at index 3 you had the word letter D, and so 1, 0, 1, 2, 3 again at index 3 you also had the letter D. So if for a single index value I, so 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, if in fact the two letters are the same, print them out to the user. So a really easy and simple example of how to use indexes and the string itself in for loops. And it is all possible again because strings are iterable. Okay, so the next property of strings we want to talk about is string as immutable. Now, you saw me write this piece of code earlier where I said first is equals to var 0, where let's say var was the word hello exclamation point, and last was var -1, and we know that this will evaluate to the letter H, and this will evaluate to the exclamation point. Now, this is very much legal in Python that you're able to extract a single component from a collection like that is a string and store it in a different variable. But you're not currently mutating the string itself. Var equals hello exclamation point did not change when you ran these two lines of code. But this particular line of code is saying, okay, go find the index 2. So let me write that 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Go find index 2, so here, this first letter L, and replace it with the letter G. Now, you might be thinking that is possibly doable, right? Because, you're just saying replace the L with a G and everything else should remain the same. Well, the way strings are defined in Python, this piece of code will give you an error. Because what you're trying to do here is that you are mutating a string. And that is very much not allowed in Python. And by mutating, I mean you keep the existing definition of a string that you had defined, but you're trying to, using this line, you're trying to manipulate it, you're trying to modify it. You cannot do that. So if you really needed to replace index 2 with a G, what you'll have to do is you'll have to redefine the entire variable again. So you'll do G, L, O, and an exclamation point here. So that, again, is not mutating, that is redefinition. So definitely not mutation, so we're not really violating this property of strings. So if, in fact, you ever come across a situation where you need to change a really small, tiny bit of a string, the only way you can do it is to redefine the entire thing all over again. And let's look at the error that comes up when you try to do that. So let's define our var again, hello, and let's try to do var 0 is the letter E. So I want to replace the letter H with an E, and let's run this code and see what happens. So you're going to see a type error, and it's saying that string object does not support item assignment. So you cannot take the item E, or the index 0, and replace it. So you cannot assign things piece by piece. You'll have to redefine the entire thing. And by that I mean you'll have to do something along the lines of EELO. And Python is very much okay with that. So again, this is not a mutation. This is me redefining the entire variable all over again. So far we have covered these four properties of strings. They are a data type, they are a collection of sequences, or a sequence of characters, and they are iterable, they are immutable. And in the next lecture, we'll talk about different kinds of methods and functions that we can apply on strings.